waiting. We'll just give a couple more minutes if we can for some of the later attendees and just for everyone to get the technology sorted out at their end. A couple of things while everyone's waiting that they could do to interact with us and also have a chat is that you should have access to a chat function on your screen. It's a little speech bubble. You might find it at the sort of the bottom center of your screen. So you can click on that chat bubble at any point in time and chat with us all here as well as anyone else that's online. So you can use the chat functionality there to say hello at any point in time, which would be great, just so we know that you're there, that you can hear us, and you can say hello to your fellow guests. The second thing just next to the chat box is there'll be a question and answer, or the ability for you to pop in any questions that you might have at any point in time. If you do that, you can definitely do the question and answer simply through the chat box as well. So if you've got any comments or questions that you might have along the way, please let me know by using the chat, and then we can unmute you at different points in time and be able to have a chat to you. The other thing is a little hand is that you can raise your hand. So towards the end, we'll have some time for questions, of course, and then you can raise your hand during that process. And there's an orderly fashion that we will answer everyone's questions if they do have any questions. So I think we've got most people that have registered and joining us today. So we shall get started. So thank you all for attending and investing some of your time with us to increase your awareness and our awareness around personal cybersecurity and how it relates to financial planning. As you know, in financial services, we have very large product disclosure statements, statements of advice, and disclaimers. And whilst this presentation doesn't cover finance in general, it's important to know that we just have a general advice disclaimer. So none of this is personal in nature in any ways, but it's intended to inform and inspire you to take a little bit more awareness in relation to your cybersecurity. Love to welcome our special guest and myself. As you know, I'm Dean Holmes. I'm one of the founders of Absolute Wealth Advisors, along with Paul Barrett and Stella Norberti. So we're very happy to welcome you along to learn today. And my special guest star is Ben Love from Grassroots IT. Hello, Ben. Ben has been our IT manager and support team probably for about 10 years now, back from when we had a physical server or physical box in our office that he used to maintain, all the way up to everything as we now say is up in the cloud. So thank you, Ben, for spending some time with us as well. Just like to share the format of what we'll do today in terms of the time that we'll spend together is essentially we've got a couple of key areas that we're going to talk about in terms of our agenda, and then I'm just going to get Ben's experience along the way as well under each of these categories. As I said earlier, if you've got questions on a particular topic, pop them in that chat box and we'll be able to hear them, answer them along the way as well. So the agenda, first and foremost, the things we'll talk about today is what I call inbound traps, which is all these categories of email, phone, and text. And so it's how a hacker may get access to some of your personal information by leading with an email, a phone, or a text. We're going to go through a couple of those. We're going to talk about some fakes. So just getting our mind around what a fake text or email or phone call is and how we can identify those as well. Financial scams, just the context of what people are trying to do in terms of financial scams, pardon me, and what access to information they're getting, and a couple of services to help as well, just in terms of paid software that you can do and help to prevent some of these. It's not going to be all in, but it's going to help along the way as well. So Ben, over to you just to start. We were talking yesterday about the difference between having software as a protection mechanism, but actually in your experience, what you've seen is more likely, unfortunately, it's a user related problem that catches it first and foremost, as opposed to the technology. Just tell us a little bit about what kind of things that you see from a human perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. From an IT and I guess a cybersecurity perspective, a lot of what we're talking about today, today we're using the word scam, in a cybersecurity sense, that's often called phishing or variations on that sort of term, and really falls under a broader banner, which is social engineering. And the challenging thing about these attacks is that they are really targeting our people. They're not targeting our technology as such. So from a purely technology, cybersecurity, business protection perspective, we have tools. We have firewalls and endpoint protection. We've got all this technology that we can put in place to try and protect the business and the organization from these attacks. But the challenge with these social engineering ones is that it's not actually the technology they're going after, it's the people. And so that really does bring a whole nother angle to how we as business owners need to be thinking about these threats and protecting our organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So we'll jump into the first category of essentially how people can get access to, just making sure you can see what I can see. Just first way in which people can get access to your information or try to phish you or scam you at the first bit is this concept of receiving an email and a link. So essentially, the first thing to always keep in mind is that whilst you may get an email from a product provider, and some of the common ones are definitely companies that we've had a relationship with in the past, but are big, because a phishing scam or any of these scams, they're just playing a numbers game. So it's very highly likely that we've all had a relationship with the Australian Tax Office, Telstra, and the Commonwealth Bank, just statistically. And so often the scammers start with those particular providers, and they offer a little bit of incentive or bait to get you to take some action on those links. And so taking the action is asking you to click on a link, which then starts a series of things. And so firstly, the clicking on the link means that the scam has started, meaning that they know that email is legitimate and someone has started reading that particular email. And then the link takes you to a page that can potentially look and feel like the product provider in question. And I'm just going to use the ATO as an example. So you will follow a link that you thought was going to the tax office. It takes you to a page that looks very, very similar or exactly like the tax office page. And they're asking you to enter some information. And unfortunately, at that point, the entering the information could potentially be into the fake ATO website. So we're going to go through a couple of examples over the slide about what that can look like. And question for you, Ben, in terms of the like we call this spam or the spam filters and things like that. How do we think about stopping these emails actually arriving in our inbox?
So there's a couple of different levels of sophistication that these type of emails can come through with. I mean, one, as you mentioned, Dean, is very generic, and it really is just a numbers game. So the malicious actors in this case are sending out a huge volume of generic emails, generally pretending to come from a brand that we're familiar with, and therefore we'll have some level of trust in. And those ones are very generic. They're often very easy to identify because of spelling mistakes, because of, well, a few other things I'm sure we'll look at in the next slide there. Now, that particular type, that level of email scam should be fairly easy to block with tech tools, with technology. So having a good email filter in place is very important. So the big cloud platforms like Microsoft Office 365 do have very good email security filtering in place, depending on which plan you have there. Some of them have got better filtering than others, but that's probably the best first line of defense, to make sure that those more generic and less sophisticated scam emails don't even make it through to your inbox.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a look at a couple of examples, and just to keep our mindset of how we can accidentally be caught. So when we look at a URL in a particular email, it's important to make sure that the URL looks and feels like the product provider. And if you ever are doubting yourself in relation to that, you're best not clicking on the link and actually typing the URL into the browser specifically. But the way in which people catch you is exactly how I've invited you to this webinar today. And this picture here is number 2 is actually the snippet from the email that I sent you all today to register. And so what happens is there's a button here that's called register here, but underneath that button, there's a very long, what we call URL, which is the website that you went to to actually get access to and register for the webinar. So a couple of tricks that comes out when you are receiving emails that are potentially scam, you may not be able to directly see the website that it's going to take you to. And so this is a great example where you can register to my webinar, but I could have been taking you to an incorrect place, for example. And so the ability to identify this and then be able to look at the URL by right clicking and copying it, for example, you can get a visual of what it is. Here's an example of where a scam email, it's very obvious that to us as the presenters that this is a scam, but this is to do with the Australian Tax Office. And what you can see is that whilst it's saying the Australian Tax Office and referring to a potential tax refund in the email, the website that it's taking you to is something else. So this clicking on this link would take you to freebies365.co.uk, but it's got the ATO Gov tax ATO return in there as well. So to the naked eye, we might accidentally click on that in order to get our tax refund. So it's just an example of link clicking and accidentally clicking on links. When you click on a link on your computer, they're either asking you to get access to information, or they might be trying to install software on your computer. The latter is obviously a little bit more dangerous and harder to prevent after you've clicked on the link. Couple more examples just to show you is that just in terms of how the look and feel might come through in a couple of these emails is that you might get bill notifications. We all get our bills to our email these days, but the Telstra and Energy Australia examples here these are examples of fake emails that are trying to get you to go to their fake websites to release some of your personal information. So once again, it's just important to be reading the content of these emails and then checking the URLs that you would go to as well. The one in the middle creates a sense of urgency. And sometimes when urgency is created, what happens is we lower our guard in relation to being aware of these things. So the idea of my Netflix being suspended immediately today takes my distraction away from the fact that I should actually be reading that email in a more detail, because I want to make sure that my Netflix is still working. Silly example, but if you extrapolate that to my mobile phone is going to be turned off, or my rental lease is going to be cancelled, or my home loan is in default, these things that they're dramatic, but they actually cause us to lower our guards a little bit in relation to emails and the links that come through. Second thing is in relation to text messages and links in text messages. So text messaging scam, I'm sure that everyone would be able to put their hand up and say that they've received at least one, if not more, text message scams. The most popular one that seems to be running around at the moment is, especially in Sydney, is not paying your tolls. Obviously, you can't go very far in Sydney without incurring tolls. And so the idea of getting a text message to say that you didn't pay your toll last week, statistically, you would be in that situation where you would be finding that you did take a toll road last week. And so these are on your mobile phone. And so, Ben, there's less chance to get a program installed on your phone, but what are they trying to do by texting you?
I think you touched on it before, Dean. When any of these scams here, they're really looking to do one of two things. The first thing is they're looking to maybe install a piece of malicious software on your computer. So that's one avenue they can take. The second is that they want you to get you to hand over some personal information, some valuable information of yours that can obviously lead them to some sort of normally financial gain. So these text messages are very likely to have a link in it that they are encouraging you to click with that sense of urgency, which will then present you with some sort of a form or a website asking to enter your information. So enter your credit card details here to avoid a bigger fine from the toll company or whatever the particular claim may be. But it's those personal details they're looking for in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, the obvious, but it's important to talk about it, is if you're getting these text messages, you can go onto the toll website directly when you get home, when you have time, and search your number plate, log into your toll provider, and see if you actually have something outstanding. We don't want to find ourselves in this situation where you're urgently trying to solve this problem on the fly, because that's when they catch you out a little bit more. Next thing, this is just a couple of different examples that I found and I've heard of the scamming. And so the ATO tax refund here, it's a great idea to get money back from the ATO. And so that's what leans people in here. As you can see, the website though is atorefund.com. That is not the ATO's website. And so if you were to click on that, it would look and feel like the ATO. Absolutely not. Economic support, this was very popular during COVID. So it's time based. You can see how they're being up to date in terms of the scam. So we're able to use this as the time based one. This one here, it's a little bit harder to see, but this is the Commonwealth Bank. I received this one myself personally. It's a screenshot of my mobile phone. It actually says Combank up here in the top of the screen, and it gives me a call to action that I need to click on a link. I can't reply to the text, but I need to click on the link. The last one is very interesting, and it's a daughter texting her mum to say that she's got a new phone number and can she send money. And so this is the level of sophistication that we're getting up to now as well, especially if you do share some stuff on social media as well. The chances of someone knowing that you have a daughter, for example, is high, and then them texting with emojis and love hearts that they've lost their phone and here's my new number. We have to understand that on the balance of probabilities, people would think that their daughter has got a new phone. It's very easy to see the communication, and then the request comes, can you send some money because I got my new phone and I can't get access to internet banking and things like that. So a story gets created off the back of this. And so that's a couple of text messaging examples as a part of it. The final one is the phone calls. And so at the moment, my mobile phone has been released to a lot of different scammers. So I'm getting a lot of these calls. Apple and Google, I know Google, as a Google user, they're doing a lot to filter out scam calls. So when my phone rings now and it is a scammer, I do get a notification on my phone. I think Apple are doing the same, but they're constantly using new phone numbers as well. So scammers rarely leave voicemails for you to take action. They want to speak to you straight away. Scammers, they're particularly trying to seek information from you and personal information that they can use to continue their role in this particular scam. And so they're going to call you and ask you to release some of your personal information. And so you need to be mindful of asking them something first to make sure that they're actually the company that they're providing or say that they're calling from. And if in doubt, you hang up and you call the company back. I know it's an inconvenience, but essentially if the ATO is calling you and you're unsure if that person is actually calling from the ATO, you hang up and dial back at a different time when you've got access to your information and can have that call. The other thing that I do from time to time is try to ask some trick questions that only, frankly, everyone in Australia will know about. It always being sunny in Brisbane, or what time is it in the particular area that they say they're calling from, or is it a public holiday where you're calling from, or why are you calling me on a public holiday? And so these kind of little tricks is to catch out the scammers essentially, because everyone that I say is legitimate is actually able to understand that, but others may not understand. So but the biggest thing is when in doubt, you're actually making sure that you're calling the provider back essentially. So the scams in terms of what they're calling about, which is important, it's a similar theme, but they're seeking you to take action relatively quickly in terms of, say, the ATO or CBA. One of the most frequent in terms of them getting access to your bank accounts is a combination of a phone call and a text. And so the situation goes like this. And if I'm the scammer and I'm calling Ben, I would call Ben and say, Ben, I need to let you know that your bank accounts have been hacked. I'm calling from the Commonwealth Bank, and I know security is important to you, Ben. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a text message to your phone, and I want you to read me that text message so I know and understand that, confirm that I'm from the Commonwealth Bank. And 2 seconds later, Ben's phone dings and he gets a code on his phone. And so, Ben, it's a 4-digit code. And what does it say after the 4 digits? I'm testing you here. He's unprepared.
I'm unprepared for that one. I'm not sure. Tell me.
It says never read this code to anyone. Okay. So what is actually happening in the background is the scammers are literally resetting your internet banking password. And through the banking multi-factor authentication, it sends a text message to Ben's phone seeking the confirmation to change the password. And so when the Commonwealth Bank or others send out that text message, they send out the code and they say, never read this to anyone. And so that is my biggest rule in this context, is that if you're getting a multi-factor or text message authentication, you're meant to type it into a particular service or particular website. You're very, very unlikely to be reading that number to someone. And so this is a quick way that scammers are resetting your internet password, is they're literally resetting your password. You're participating because you're reading the text message code where it says never read to anyone. And then they've got access to your internet banking. And from there, they're making funds transfers, they're changing your address, they're changing your mobile phone number, and they've got access to the system from then on in. So that's a common way that the financial scamming starts, in terms of they've got access to your computer. Sorry, they've got access to your internet banking. The second way that people seek to get access is through this program called remote desktop. And so there's a variety of different examples of this, Ben, but this was designed by the IT industry to support clients in terms of that they could remotely access people's computers through this process. And unfortunately now it's being used for evil as well, in that the hackers are using the remote desktop and IT support service to come in and actually install programs on your computer and to get access to your machines remotely. So we need to be mindful that if you're not paying someone for something and someone's offering you free IT support and they're offering to gain access to your computer for free, it's most likely in the hacking category than they're just a nice person category trying to help you. Ben, have you had any experience on that remote desktop side?
Yeah, absolutely. It is reasonably common there. The one that we certainly hear about is when a client gets a call supposedly from Microsoft tech support
Yes.
saying that they've identified a problem on your computer, and with your assistance they get remote control of the computer, purportedly to fix whatever this problem is that Microsoft has discovered on your computer. And of course, once they've got control, they can do all sorts of nefarious things
Yep.
to your information in your computer. But again, Dean, you touched on it. Microsoft, I can absolutely guarantee that Microsoft is not going to be calling any one of us on the phone individually to say that they've identified a problem on our computer.
Yep.
That is simply just not plausible.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are the tricks that we need to be aware of, is that who would actually be calling us and why. Is the tax office doesn't often call us, especially for our clients on the call. Tax offices most likely go through to your accountant, or if the tax office does call you, go back to your accountant or us and go, why is the tax office calling me? Can you look into it for me with the assistance of my accountant? So it's these little tricks to be aware of, in terms of Microsoft's not going to call you. Amazon is another one. Amazon doesn't call you in terms of offering to you a refund. So these big service providers actually aren't calling customers. So the next thing, Ben, I wanted to share with you and the audience is actually just in relation to absolute wealth advisors and the things that we do and won't do in terms of working with our clients. And I think this is very important as well, because we've got the opportunity to be an extra layer of brick walls, but also absolute wealth advisors, we've been subject to scams as well, which I'm going to share a couple about, with the interaction with clients, or what we thought was clients. So a couple of things that we never do is we never need to ask you for your password. That's something that never comes up in our world. We don't need to ask that information. We'll never ask you to transfer any money to personal accounts for investments. So one of the important things about security of your money that we manage on your behalf is that there's a lot of third parties which are custodians that we might transfer money to, but you're never going to be transferring money for an investment into Dean Holmes's personal bank account, for example. And whilst that might sound like a funny example for our relationship, think about it for if you're setting up making any funds transfers. We've got to be really mindful of where that money's going and have we checked the bank account details. So what will we do, especially for funds transfers? We're going to seek two separate confirmations before actioning funds transfer, especially if it's to a new bank account. And so this falls into the category of multi-factor authentication. But if you were to send us an email, for example, which says, "Hi Stella, hope you're having a nice day. We're having a great holiday. Can you please transfer us urgently another $10,000 because we've used all of our money? Here's the bank account details. Kind regards, client." So that sounds like a really legitimate email. And so what we need to do at that point in time is we need to contact you to make sure that those bank details are correct, especially if we've never paid into that account on your behalf in the past. We've had a couple of different scenarios whereby our clients' emails have been hacked and we've received that exact email. So we've received an email pretending to be a client asking for a funds transfer. And so it is difficult for us to ascertain that, or the difference between you emailing us and the hacker emailing us, because they've got access to your sent emails. So they can see how many times you've communicated with us, for example, and the language that you use. And so the trick is that they're sending us an email and it literally sounds exactly the same. It sounds exactly the same as if you've sent us that communication. And so we need to do that multi-factor authentication of talking to you as a result. So that's in terms of our personal experience on how we've been trying to stop this in the past in terms of getting these emails, is actually taking that extra step forward in receiving your email and doing something about it by that multi-factor authentication. So we're definitely assisting by putting that additional brick wall up. What our clients need to know is that we're doing that for all of our safety and security at the end of the day. A couple of different services in terms of paying for protecting data. So there's a couple of different ways we manage stuff internally, which is quite important. Sorry, my phone's ringing at the same time. So a couple of different services that we use to protect our data. So first and foremost, we use a password protection tool, which allows us to generate very long and complicated passwords. That's something that's important for accessing websites, is that if a hacker were to get access to your data and then know and understand one of your passwords, and if you use that same password across everything, what it's going to mean is that they're able to quickly and easily get access to a variety of different websites as a result of that. Second thing is this concept called the dark web. Ben, in 20 seconds or less, or you can have a bit more, what is the dark web and who is in this dark web?
The dark web is a part of the internet which is hidden from everyday users like you or I. You need special tools, special web browsers or special VPNs to access it. And a lot of nefarious stuff happens on the dark web. There's a lot of illegal activities, I guess, a lot of products bought and sold, including personal information that hackers have gained from people who they've breached.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Great example, Ben. So we know in the real world, there was a couple of data breaches between Optus, Medibank and Beyond and Latitude. And so that information was obtained, stolen, and it was put up for auction or released on the dark web. So we can't see it, but lots of other people can see it. One of the most important things is this particular website, which the name of it is not the best, but it's called Have I Been Pawned, is how you say this particular website. And you're actually able to put your email address in there and see if your email address has been subject to any data breaches and if it's available on the dark web. So this is an example of, on the screen here, there's a couple of this is my old email address, and my old email address has been found in the dark web about 17 times now because it's been in existence for a long period of time. So you can check this. We also use this LastPass software, and that is it's a paid for service, which is important when we think about protecting ourselves. Paying for something actually gets us something. So this LastPass software actually is tracking email addresses in the dark web as well. Final thing, a couple of final thoughts to think about before we open it up to questions. So if you've got any questions, you can access the chat, pop them in, please. This concept called multi-factor authentication, I hinted with it in terms of us calling you if you send us an email. The most common multi-factor authentications are you try to log into a website, you get a text message, you need to use your Google Authenticator or your Microsoft Authenticator. It provides you a code on your phone. You might get a multi-factor authentication to your email and you need to put a code in. So it's two ways that you're accessing the data. And the theory behind it is if you know the password, but you've got your physical phone with you, it's much harder to get access to the website. Now, what we need to call out in terms of multi-factor authentication is that your employer or your work computer probably sets it by default because they've got a lot of smart IT people working for them to protect corporate infrastructure. Multi-factor authentication is available on a lot of consumer websites as well. We've just got to go and turn it on and think about it. So definitely, if you think about Facebook or Gmail or Instagram, you've got the ability to turn on multi-factor authentication, which means that it's harder for anyone to get access to your personal information, but it's not on by default. So I want to call out, if you've got personal information in particular websites, you need to research as to whether you can use multi-factor authentication to protect that at a further level. A couple of different ideas to call out in being aware of how you can protect your data even more going forward is there's no problem having two email addresses. One email address that you might use for only personal information. So you might have an email address which is just for your communication with your bank, your financial advisor, your accountant, and only a very, very small community of people know that email address. Then you might have one for everything else, and so your online shopping, your Netflix, and things like that. And so the chances of the private email address people getting access to that or knowing it exists is reduced because a smaller community of people know that email address. The second thing on email as well is that if you're paying for email, Ben mentioned Microsoft 365, and that's something that we subscribe to as well. At a consumer level, you can also pay for email and you can have a Microsoft account and get access to a level of email security. If you're only using free email addresses, it is a concept of what the value of what you're getting paid for. So definitely the idea of Google, Apple, and Microsoft as three big partners are important, but you can pay for additional security, and this is important when we're going forward in terms of people trying to get access to our personal information. Same concept with mobile phones is there's no problem having a second mobile phone only for banking and other information that you might have, and then you might have a second phone for all of the external communication that you do. So the phone sits in the drawer at home potentially, and you only get it out when you need to do internet banking or text message with your financial advisor or a few other things. It's only used for those particular purposes, and that's going to make sure that the chances of that number getting known is also very low. And finally, before we open up the floor to any questions that might happen, I love us to talk about it. So it can happen to anyone, and it does happen to anyone, and it catches us out in thinking that we thought we were a smart person, and then we're subject to a victim of these scam. And everyone that has been subject to it is absolutely a victim. And the people are sophisticated in the way in which they're doing it. I liken it to this David and Goliath kind of element, and David can win in the end, is that we're competing against hundreds of thousands of people that know the internet, know the scams, talk to one another about scams that are successful, talk to one another about new ways to scam particular people. And so they're all banding together to share all that information and to actually grow their industry. Although it's a criminal industry, they're trying to grow it. And so we need to be on the other side and actually call out and understand how it's happening. Now, the volume of money in relation to these, I know these are not as clear as they should be on your screen potentially, but the articles that have come out recently is all about over $3 billion of losses in Australia in relation to financial scams. And so we want to decrease that number by actually talking about it. So if you have been a victim, it is very unfortunate, but the way you can win going forward is obviously secure yourself better for a second, to avoid a second attack. And they do try a second attack. And the second thing is to share that with your family and friends. Although it may be embarrassing, I really want to call it out as something that if we can share these stories with one another, we're actually more likely to be able to be aware of them and prevent them in the future. Ben, any final thoughts in terms of from your perspective before we open up to a little bit of Q&A, if anyone has any questions in the audience?
I think probably the two big things from me, really, I don't take things at face value, particularly when they have to do with asking you for either money or personal information. Always double check that somehow. And the other one really is just about that education and awareness, particularly for those of us who've got other people in their team. It's also important to be sharing that information around with your friends, your family, people, colleagues you work with on a daily basis, because sometimes it's the weakest link in that whole chain that sort of lets the bad actors through.
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So I will open it up to the floor for any questions. We've got about 7 minutes to go. If anyone does have questions, I've actually given everyone the ability to unmute themselves. It could be dangerous. I've given everyone the ability to turn their cameras on. If they want to wave to me, they can do that now. Of course, if you don't have any questions or would like to speak to us separately, please get in contact with the team, with your advisors, Paul and Stella, or myself. I do know half the people on the call, so you can reach out to me if you've got any questions at all. I'll do a 1 minute of oh, good. Thank you, Brian. Hi, Brian. Great to hear from you. Hope you are well. So good question in terms of hackers accessing our information. So this is a joint responsibility and something that Ben and I have been working on as well. So we, in the frankness of our relationship, we collect a lot of personal and financial information on our clients. We know that, and we store that into two databases. And so everything that we do have at the moment, Brian, is stored in a financial planning software called Advisor Logic, which is built on an Amazon cloud. So that technology is partnered with Amazon in terms of providing a level of data security. And then secondly, our other information is built on the Microsoft cloud. And Ben will tell us a little bit more about how Microsoft is working in that security, because I think that's really interesting. But so the first thing is that we're partnering with very large providers in terms of where the data is stored. And then the second thing, as we found with like the Medibank hack, for example, Brian, is that you can have it on the best technology, but we have to make sure that we lock the front gates as an analogy. And so that's where all of our staff are using multi-factor authentication to log into these systems at all times. And secondly, then our passwords are also protected through this program called LastPass, which also has multi-factor authentication on it. So the access into our system is the most important thing that we have to protect at all time. And so we're protecting it through the systems of multi-factor authentication and then complicated passwords. And then really the second element that's really important to us is training. So we need to continue to train our train our staff and then train our clients as well in terms of making sure that we're getting the right information, the right awareness in relation to everything. So that's Ben, over to you. Just tell us a little bit about how strong Microsoft is.
Yeah, look, the actual underlying platforms there that Microsoft have created in form of, I guess, Microsoft Office 365 and Azure. Amazon is the same with AWS, Amazon Web Services. The actual platform layer on these things are phenomenally secure. Like, they have invested billions and billions and billions and continue to do so to make sure that platform is secure. So you kind of can have a pretty good level of confidence that piece is taken care of. The next layer, as Dean said there, really is all about the applications that you're using that are running on top of those platforms. And that comes down to having confidence in the application vendors that you choose, and making sure that they have a really strong culture themselves of security. And then the next piece really comes down to your internal governance, right? Your own processes and procedures, and doing regular reviews of your own organizational risk, cybersecurity risk, as well as the other types of risk, and just refreshing that, because threats that didn't exist yesterday will exist tomorrow and vice versa. It is a moving feast. So we just have to have that awareness within our own businesses of constantly reviewing the risks there and how our organization is positioned to mitigate those.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. The other question, which is really good from Jeff, I'm just going to share my screen to show you a little bit of the data on that, is how Jeff has asked how often are your passwords changed and things like that. And so two things I want to share around this, hopefully this comes up reasonably well on the screen, is what I would like to say, and Ben, you can help me give your view as well, is that I think it's less about the frequency of password change and the more about the length and complexity. And so if anyone could see, hopefully you can see this okay on the screen. So what this is saying is the number of characters or length of your password, and then the complexity of the password. So complexity is numbers, uppercase, lowercase, letters, and symbols. And this is the time that it takes a computer to hack your password. So in relation to your question, Jeff, if I had a 4-character password of only numbers, but I changed it every week, it's actually very likely to be hacked still because of how quickly a brute force attack can do it. And so the key for us is to actually go, we need a minimum of 18 characters in our password with a combination of numbers, upper and lowercase letters and symbols, so that it takes, I think this is like 7 quadrillion years or something. Well, this is 93 years. Well, that's 15 billion years. So it's something 93 to the something, Ben. So the take it away, Jeff, in terms of actually having the length of password and the complexity of passwords in terms of that. So that's one element in terms of what we do. The last pass is on what I would say probably, in order to answer your question, Jeff, it is in the public cloud, as in most data, i.e. Microsoft and Azure and Amazon are all determined to be what I would say the public cloud, but the cloud is accessible by anyone, even though I have my own tenant, so my own personal access to that. It's all in the public cloud. But in terms of the accessing the key in order to get access to the LastPass public cloud, that's all stored on local machines with local passwords that are known only by the users. So happy to do a little bit more digging in terms of the Telstra thing in terms of LastPass. I can't comment directly, Jeff, but Bentley and I will come back to you on that one most definitely.
I think there's some interesting commentary around that actually from Microsoft these days. Dean, from an IT management perspective, we've historically always had password policies in place across networks, which force everybody to change their password every 60 days or 90 days or whatever it may be. The official guidance from Microsoft these days, though, is actually bad practice.
Right? To change your password.
Yes.
Yep.
The official guidance from Microsoft these days is that you should not have some sort of forced password change. But what you should absolutely have is complex passwords, as you just said there. You should be using different passwords on all of the different accounts that you have across different platforms. Yep. And you must be using multi-factor authentication wherever you possibly can. But changing passwords, that's actually something they're actively recommending not to enforce these days.
I would say from a user perspective, when you make me change my password, I just change the last number from a 1 to a 2. So instead of QWERTY1, or password 1, I then change it to password 2, which obviously catches me out. So yeah, Jeff, we'll come back to you separately with a little bit more information there, just so I'm not across the detail. If there's any other questions, happy to have them in the chat. Lou, lovely to see you. Got your camera on, so I can wave to you. Thank you very much for those that attended. If you have any follow-up questions, by all means, please share that with us. This video will be on YouTube, which we'll share with all of our clients. Please share that with anyone that you know and love in terms of increasing the awareness for personal cybersecurity, and happy to answer any questions that come off the back of that as well. So until then, enjoy the rest of your day.